Hi, I'm Susan King. I'm the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at UNC Chapel Hill. And I have the pleasure today of interviewing a real investigative reporter. We're talking somebody who has a Pulitzer Prize, so that categorizes as a real investigative reporter. But we want to brag about you for just a second because you are a 1966 UNC journalism alum. Congratulations. And more than that, you're one of our Halls of Fame members for your work in journalism, 2005. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I want to know, just to start, what's it take to be an investigative reporter? Do you learn it or are you born one?
You know, I think the instinct that you're born with, I don't believe you can take just any reporter, just like you can't take any reporter and make a really good writer out of them. I think some of it's just in them. Now you can help them get better. And the same thing's true of investigative reporters. I think they're born. But having said that, there are ever so many skills that can be taught that will make them better.
And you were just telling me that when you see a box of public records, you salivate.
Yeah, I do. I like records more than I can say, probably too much.
What is it about records? What was it? Was it that you learned what was in them and they were great stories? What draws you to them?
They give you the high ground. Once I find the record that I need, I can deal with people. You know, you're forever dealing with people who are, many of them are just smarter than I am. And they're certainly more experienced at what they do than I am. But somehow you have to gain an advantage, and records will give you that.
And public records are really the people's information, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I love working for the News and Observer is if you didn't give them a public record that they'd requested, they'd sue you, and everybody knew it. So while people delayed us from time to time, we almost always got what we needed.
Now, of course, I didn't say right up the top that you were the most important investigative reporter at the News and Observer for many years, and you won that Pulitzer Prize with them. But before we go into that particular one, which I love the name of Boss Hogg, what motivated you to become an investigative reporter? Was it watchdog? Did you want to get the bad guy? What was it?
Well, you know, people play to their skills. When I was a young man, in what would now be called an internship at the Charlotte News, when I was 20 years old, I was just out of the service, out of the Navy, where I was a Navy journalist. I did a story about a coach that had been dismissed for shooting Novocaine into his injured players. I didn't cause him to be dismissed. I only found out why he had been dismissed. But that was an interesting piece of work. And later when I graduated from UNC and went to work down there full time, I covered courts and cops and whatnot. But I was always looking for the story that they weren't going to give to you. You know, I was never interested in covering a huge fire. You know, if half of Raleigh caught on fire, and I hope it never does, I was never interested in covering a story like that because I already knew what was going to happen. There was some people going to be hurt, there'd be property damage, and so forth, or a big car wreck. I already knew what was going to happen, just fill in the blanks. But investigative work, you don't know what's going to happen.
Like a mystery.
Yes.
How would you get onto something? Tips? Was it your own instincts?
Well, often it's tips, but you know, sometimes it's just looking at your own life, your own experiences. For example, I drive old vehicles. I drove 2 surplus state cars into the ground, having bought them at auction. And I was always, I thought, overcharged on taxes. Now, you know, maybe the tax on my car should have been $10 and it was 18. Still, I was being overcharged, I thought. And so one day I went down and made some inquiries about it. And it turns out that, yeah, everybody was being overcharged with old cars because the government assumes a certain mileage and assumes a certain condition. Unless you show otherwise, that's the basis of your payment. So sometimes you can take things right out of your own life, but more often it is a tip.
And you have to get a reputation then, and then people say this guy will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the advantages in staying in the same place as long as I did. I was at the News and Observer from 1971 until my retirement in 2008, so that was helpful.
What was the best story you ever had? The Pulitzer Prize winning one?
Well, you know, obviously it was the most successful, but the story I enjoyed most was really a two-day story.
Okay.
Another reporter there, Steve Riley, who's now an assistant ME, he and I were working together on it. We did a story about a workers' comp. It turned out okay. There was some legislation that was passed out of it and so forth. But after that story, or series of stories, got in the paper, a woman called me. And she said to me, "You don't know how it works, do you?" You know, and people did say that to me from time to time. My response always was, you know, I guess I don't. How about you explain it to me? And I was being as sincere as possible. She said, "Well, I'll be glad to." And she came down and explained it to me. She had been a state employee, a nurse, and she worked for one of the mental hospitals. And they required her to take some self-defense course. Now, this woman was in her 50s. She had been divorced. She had been a stay-at-home mom, and she went back to school and learned nursing. So now she had a job. And during this course, which she didn't volunteer for, she was injured. And she worked on with an arm in a sling for a while, and then when it became too painful, she got operated on. And when she did, she came back to work as soon as she could, but she had a 15% disability. And she said, "I can't lift anymore, but I can do all the rest of my job, and I want to go back to work." And they said, "When you're 100%, you can come back." And she said, "I'm never going to be 100%. And they said, "Well, goodbye." That, she said, is how it worked. Well, I knew right then, if this woman gave me the opportunity to tell the story, we were going to level the playing field. And, but she wouldn't, not initially, because she wasn't seeking publicity. But gradually she changed her mind, and I wrote the story. And the secretary of the department got up early, he told me later, on a Sunday morning, read it, and they changed the rules so that now in North Carolina, if an employee is injured in the service to North Carolina, the government will retrain them if necessary and find them a different job.
So they can remain productive members, taxpayers.
Now that was just one person, but I got more charge out of that
Why?
than almost any other.
Why? Because you helped her?
Oh yeah, they got her a job. Before the week was out, she was back at work.
Is that what really made it so exciting, that you were able to take one person's experience and really turn a policy?
Well, you know, it doesn't happen very often, but it did happen occasionally, and those were the stories that I liked the best. I wrote, you know, policy stories and agencies that weren't, you know, that were failing, overweight trucks roaming the highways and things like that. But it was the stories that came along from time to time that impacted a single person sometimes that I liked the most. You know, the reason is because these people couldn't get justice anywhere else. And for them, the News and Observer was the court of last appeal. It was the court of last resort.
And that's what people have always loved about journalism, too. It kind of shines a spotlight on the little people, right?
That's so much fun. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you've told a story to some of our students about chewing tobacco and how it influenced your life. So you got to share that with us.
Well, you know, it's not all about sources. And it's not all about computers, which I learned to like a whole lot late in life. I was doing a story many years ago. I was a young man. I was chewing tobacco. And I chewed Red Man. And I could chew Red Man indoors and hold it, especially if I had a cup of coffee. But outdoors, I chewed apple. And apple is a really strong tobacco. I couldn't hold it in my mouth. I had to spit. And I was doing a story about a community where it was a really poor community. The thing that distinguished it was two things. The people owned their own homes, but they didn't have any money. And it was a mixed race, poor community. And so the government had a program that gave them a grant, these homeowners, to fix up their house, to help them get a new roof or you know, insulation, maybe to get some stiff knees out from under their house, so forth. But it was crooked. And so I was taking the contracts that had been approved and paid and compared them against the house. And I was standing on the sidewalk in front of this woman's house, and I intended to go in later, or to try to go in and interview her, but not right then. And I just put in some apple. And she came to the door, and she saw me. I'm a white guy. This was a black woman. And I'm standing on the sidewalk staring at her house. And she said to me, "Who are you and what are you doing?" And so it was now or never. You know, I told her who I was and what I was doing and asked if I could come in and talk with her. She said yes, and I went inside. And I sat on the sofa and began to talk to her. This woman did not trust me as far as she could throw me. And she was giving me one-word answers. In the meantime, I'm about to drown. I'm starting to tilt my head back like this, and I'm trying to keep my head level, because if I don't, this tobacco juice is just going to run right out of one side of my mouth and on my shirt. So finally, I can hardly talk anymore, and I say to her, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to come in and talk with you now. I just put in a plug of apple. I got to go to the door and spit." And she said to me, "Well, Law, reach on that sofa and get my spit can." And so I did. I reached out there and I spit out all that. And she said to me, "Have you ever chewed any day's work?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And she said, "Would you like to?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she cut me off a plug a day's work, and I put it in my mouth, started chewing it. And she said, "Now you come on back here to this bathroom, let me show you what they did back here." So after that, I could do no wrong.
That's called rapport.
That's what it's called.
It's called being a good journalist, learning how to connect with people. Is that the biggest thing, too, about journalism, sort of being that representative of that little person, being able to sort of stand up for them, have them a voice?
I think the thing that a journalist ought to try to be is on the side of truth. And if that's where poor people are against the moneyed interest, then fine. But wherever the truth is, that's the side I would want to be on. That's the side I tried to be on.
So at this day and age, you know, people think that all reporters are one side. You know, they're either liberals and they're trying to turn the world that way, or they're conservatives and they're trying to do it the other way. What's your sort of view of it today?
You know, I guess there's some of that going around, but not in the good newspaper men and women and the good broadcasters. I mean, you know, I had people. The News and Observer historically was Democratic oriented, and I had people say to me from time to time when I would occasionally write about Republicans that the News and Observer was picking on. The truth be told, if you went back and looked at the material I wrote over 35 years, the overwhelming majority of it is against Democrats. Not because the News and Observer didn't like Democrats, it did, but because Democrats were in power. You know, I wouldn't mind writing all about the Republicans if they were in power. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me. Never did.
So is corruption just part of the powerful, and you need to have a little bit of a balance by having someone else pushing those in power because it's easy to be corrupted?
No, I don't mean to associate that. I've seen some people in government in North Carolina, and President Bill Friday heads the list, who are just really, I thought, magnificent people. Mm-hmm. And so just having power itself, some of them are really good folk and some of them are not. Just like some poor folk are really wonderful people and some of them are not.
So it's having the mirror, having a journalist sort of asking the questions that kind of keeps us moving forward as a democracy.
Yeah. You know, that's my fear now, that we're removing one of the safeguards, or weakening is a better term, I guess, one of the safeguards. I don't know how many times over the years people would say to me, "You know, I almost had one for you." "Oh, you did? Well, what changed your mind?" "Well, it didn't happen." "Well, what's up?" "Well, I was in a meeting and they were talking about doing so-and-so and I just couldn't get them off of it. And finally I said, "Well, how would you like this to wind up on the front page of the N&O?" And all of a sudden things changed. Well, my point is the fact that the News and Observer has been there, and other media outlets also, prevents a lot of things from being happening.
Well, I think in this school we're still training young people to be journalists will hold people's feet to the fire. I don't know what medium they're going to be in, but that sense of justice has got to pervade. So I want to have you give them advice. You know, how do they use those investigative skills? What should be their driving force if they want to get in the business of public interest reporting?
Well, you know, it starts with something that the school can't teach. I guess mom and dad teach it, and that's just honesty. That's the starting point. And then I would say to them, you don't have to be the smartest one. You can defeat the smarter people. You can outwork them. You have to be smart enough, but you don't have to be the smartest one. So I would say that they ought to resolve to come down on the side not of this faction or that faction, but on the side of the truth of the matter. You know, I see a lot of emphasis on accuracy, and it's properly placed, but accuracy is a minimum standard. It's not the goal. Accuracy is the minimum standard. The goal is to get to the truth of the matter. You know, in a quote, for example, you don't want people ideally to say simply, well, I said that. What you want them to say is, not only did I say it, but that's what I meant.
But lately, what they said and what they did were pretty far from matching. It's a good career being a journalist, huh?
It's outstanding. You know, when I was blessed because I worked, my dad had a sweatshop in Charlotte, and it was a terrible place to work. I mean, it was a clothes hanger factory, and it was extremely hot. It was unventilated. It was smoky. By 10 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't see it. It was terrible. And he paid me 50 cents an hour. This was in the late 50s. And when I won a sports writing contest, and that's how I got my first newspaper job as an intern in 1960. And I'm in this room, and it's air conditioned. These guys are laughing and talking, and they get through the first edition deadline. One of them says to me, boy, go down the street there to the cafe and get me a fried egg sandwich and tell them not to put so much mayonnaise on it. Here's some money, get one for yourself. So I walk down, they're paying me $1 an hour, by the way. I walk down the street, it's a gorgeous day. I'm getting paid to walk down the street and get a sandwich and get one for myself. And I thought, oh my word, this is the life for me. Because you see, I knew this is not a real job. I've had a real job, and this is not it. I've always loved newspapers. You know, you get up in the morning, and you really can't. You can hardly wait to get to work. And you never look at the clock. Or I keep talking in the present tense as if I'm still a newspaper man, and I'm not. But you never look at the clock and wish it were going faster. You want it to stop. Better than that, go backwards a little bit and give you more time to do the kind of job you want to do.
You're the personification of what made this a great industry. May we both hope that the students we graduate in these current classes have that same drive so that this business stays as vital and as interesting
Thank you.
in this time of change. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.